world facing mounting environmental challenges, creative and community-driven approaches are more important than ever. In this interview, I speak with Manjusha Nair, the visionary behind Participatory Media, Images of Change, a project that empowers students through collaborative media to explore themes of ecology and waste management. By integrating participatory communication with personal reflection and creative expression, this initiative seeks to inspire both inner transformation and meaningful outer action. Good morning, Manjusha, and thank you for joining me today.
Good morning, Charlie. It's good to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
And thank you once again for your time, because I know how busy you are with all these wonderful projects. Could you start today by telling us about the inspiration behind your project, Participatory Media, Images of Change? What led you to focus on ecology and waste management within your project?
Well, participatory communication has been around since the 60s. And I would say that my project, the concept for my project, Participatory Media Project, comes from a very personal and a collective shared space. I say collective because, as I said, historically, participatory communication has been around. It has been used very effectively in social contexts, in community development. And participatory communication brings empowerment. It brings visibility to the community by allowing them to express their issues and their needs to the larger world, so to speak. I used this context and added a very distinctive approach to it by bringing in certain transpersonal values of wanting to engage with the inner self, wanting to bring in a reflective process of being able to see things differently, of being able to create stories that would come from a sense of ecological consciousness. When I say personal, it's also because I have been engaged in teaching filmmaking skills to school students in simpler ways, using technology in very simple and immersive ways. And with my multiple skills as a filmmaker and 25 years of making films, also my formal education practice in art and design college, and of course my master's with Alef Trust, I would say these were largely the influences that probably helped me to evolve the concept of the participatory media project. Bringing in the context of environment and ecology, I would say that right now, the way that we are on this planet, it is one of the most important and urgent issues that face us all. It is something that is impacting all of humanity. And the way that I think the environmental issues have unfolded, the climate change, the confusion around plastic use, the amount of waste that is generated, and the confusion about its disposal, the issues that's causing, the way that it's choking up our oceans, bringing a lot of changes. I think it is something that is very important and in front of us, and I think it was, I wanted to bring in these issues. I also realized somewhere that there is an abstraction of our relationship with ecology. Most of us individuals think that it's the onus of the government or the non-governmental organizations that are working with the environmental issues to think about ecological problems. And none of us are really truly connected in some ways. And I felt that the project could in some way bring in connections with the natural world, bring in ecological consciousness into the context and with the participants.
Why is participatory communication and media creation a vital part of your approach? And how do you see it influencing the students participating within your project?
Right. So as I mentioned earlier, participatory communication itself is a very powerful process. So I think bringing in filmmaking as an approach is about bringing in the art practice. And I think the students really benefited from that because it gave them an opportunity to look at things in a very creative way, to bring in imagination, to bring in storytelling components, And to hear the stories coming from their experience is something that is very, very interesting, I think. The reflective process of engagement with the arts and with technology, in fact, which was very interesting for them. I used technology in a very simple way. I brought in digital phones, some very simple microphones, and explained the process. And all of us, I think, today are quite used to using phones.
Yeah.
But using them within the project actually changed the context of their engagement with the same technology. They were using it in ways that brought in a very immersive kind of an engagement
Hmm.
and a very reflective space for them. And I think that was very important in the way that it unfolded.
Okay. So how was partnering with Deer Park, the partnership, how did this support or shape the evolution of this initiative with you?
Um, Actually, Deer Park Institute is a center for study of Indian wisdom traditions, located in Bir in the Himachal area. And I have been acquainted with them since the last 10 years or so.
Hmm.
They are also engaged with environmental issues and creating ecological awareness with the community for over the last 10 years or more, I would say, maybe 2 decades almost, across the Trans-Himalayan region. And I also would like to mention here that Deer Park is very, very conscious about the way in which they create a relationship with nature, with ecology. They are very conscientious about using sustainable ways of engaging, and they hold workshops and retreats around mindfulness. So they were actually a very ideal partner. I received tremendous support from them in terms of the space that they offered, support for my ideas, and the access to the community. Also, Trilok Singh, who is my co-researcher and co-facilitator on the project, is the ecology project coordinator at Deer Park. And he was with me right through and supporting the project, I would say, in a very, very able and a very supportive way.
How did the reflective engagements within the students turn out in the project?
Okay, I actually use a metaphor called as the learning trampoline to describe my process. It's a metaphor in a sense that it informs my teaching endeavors, and it's a very intentional framework that I strive to keep. It's also a philosophy that sustains a lot of my pedagogical explorations.
Okay.
I realized very early on in my experience as an art educator and a teacher that art cannot be taught. It is something that can only be experienced. So, what is possible for me is to facilitate an environment that nurtures and encourages artistic expression through art practice and habits. So, as a facilitator, again, speaking very metaphorically, one hopes to open the door or a window to invite them to be able to walk out and look at the world in different ways, in being able to engage, to look at the limitless possibilities that might arise, and to be able to use their imagination in very profound ways into storytelling, into creating this whole process of making small films. And that's the learning trampoline that I offered the participants, which actually became a very, very reflective kind of an engagement in the project.
Could you describe some of the creative methods and tools you're using to generate awareness about environmental issues?
Um, Well, the way that it actually unfolded was that the project was working at multiple dimensions and diverse contexts. We were using participatory approach, and we were also working within the context of ecology, creating a relationship with ecology and environment, the natural world for the students through the sessions. And we were also going to be engaging with technology and creating films. So you see, the whole thing was working at very diverse levels and at multiple contexts. Now, within this, what was first and foremost very important was to create a safe space, a circle of participation. It was very important for me because the way that the Indian school system is designed, it's a very linear system with the teacher probably standing at the board, and most of the students sit in horizontal rows, none of them facing each other, each one behind the other, and there is not much interaction in the class. So the first step that we took was basically to create a circle that we would sit in. And this
Mm.
itself was very new for the students. Suddenly they had to face each other, they had to speak. When they first came in, they were not really able to even spell out their names very clearly. Although they had volunteered and they had taken all the trouble to walk up the mountain paths and to reach Deer Park, but they really lacked the social skills or the confidence to interact with each other.
Okay.
Putting them into a circle and then sort of working on building trust, building confidence became a priority and something that we sort of engaged in first and foremost. After that, as things began to slowly open up, secondly was the pathways of learning. So I used I think it's important to realize that it's not possible for children, although they are very imaginative, very creative to start with, but maybe it is the school system, maybe it is the way that society functions. But you find that a lot of the times the imagination, the creative aspect is not really allowed to flourish. They are basically told to ingest a lot of information and possibly just sort of tell it or regurgitate it almost during the
Mm.
exam time. And that is really their access to learning. In some
Okay.
ways, their creativity almost gets squashed or stifled. So realizing that it's not possible for them to suddenly start imagining and creating stories or making films. I also realized through my art and design practice that it's important to create pathways that encourage thinking skills. And I'm talking about critical, creative, contemplative thinking skills that would
Okay.
bring in an understanding of the world around them and also an understanding of the self, which is what I mean when I say that the inner and the outer engagement becomes very important in the learning process. So using this and then using the context of ecology as a container to further work with technology, to work with um, the immersive experiences of being able to learn the craft, to learn the different skills that would help them to start creating images and narratives. In some ways, I think that was some of the learning pathways that I used. Besides this, there was also an experiential space. We would watch films. We would go out to look at some of the waste dump yards where there was huge mounds of rubbish that were piled. And then after that, I would take them out into nature. They would actually sit under the trees and feel the beauty of the nature around us. Because what is it that they are supposed to protect? What is it that they are supposed to connect? It is something that needed to be brought into their consciousness. So we used ways in which we could bring in a very experiential kind of a process. And then I also brought in this whole practice of journaling, something that they were not used to, in very simple ways of maybe answering questions like, what did you do today? What did you learn today? And how do
Mm.
you feel about it? It was a very new experience for them. Initially, they were very hesitant to write because they had never been used to writing how they felt. Nobody had ever asked them how they felt about what they were learning or anything. These are not questions that come up in Indian schools.
Yeah.
But once they really started journaling, I think they started sort of expressing things that were coming into their mindscape, into their consciousness. And that was building bridges, slowly opening them up to being able to imagine a different world, being able to imagine how things could be. And I think
Mm.
that's where the whole learning started to unfold very beautifully.
How does your project blend inner transformation with outer action in addressing ecological concerns?
So yes, as I said now, I think it unfolded in the project
Mm.
in ways that I could facilitate these sessions, that I could sort of bring ideas to them. We were had, to tell you an example, we worked in cycles. We
Mm.
worked in cycles of 2.5 months, and then leaving gaps in between. So for rains or for the winter. And these were the gaps that allowed them to sort of process what had gone on very intensely. We met about 3 times a week on alternate days. This was after school, and they would walk long miles to reach Deer Park and to participate in the project. Through all this, as the sessions unfolded, when it was the day of the session, I would probably write down a couple of lines as my lesson plan, a very kind of a loosely constructed understanding of what could unfold for that day. I would take that and I would share that with the student participants, and then we would sort of start working towards that. I had some kind of a loose understanding of where each week was headed, and alternating these different thinking skills, being able to use the space in ways that they were not really used to, helping them to learn how to quantify language, how to quantify learning, how to quantify knowledge, how to do research, how to be able to work with that to create stories. To give you also another example was once they came in, we would start by maybe lighting a lamp. I would pick out, or some of the students would volunteer alternatively, and they would go and light the lamp, and then we would sit in a circle. I also introduced some very basic pranayama or the breathing practices, like the alternate nostril breathing or the Brahmari, because they would have come from a whole day at school. There would have been a lot of stress. There would have been very competitive energies. What I'm trying to bring into this circle of space of the project was something which was collaborative, something that was contemplating, and something that was co-creating a framework of understanding. And to shift them from their usual school routine to come into that project space, we would follow small rituals like lighting the lamp that I mentioned. We would sit around and probably do some breathing exercises. Um, and all of this would help them to sort of center, to ground, to focus, to calm down, and help them to come into that space of the project. I think all these kind of small ways and pathways that I found of engaging with them, they sort of built one upon the other. We were able to scaffold that. And when it came for time for the artistic practice, I think that's when the shifts really started happening. We could see the inner changes coming about just in the way that they related to each other, just in the
Yes.
way that they started confidently coming forward to speak or to present something that they had not been able to do initially. Also, in the ways that they suggested if we could learn in this way or if we could evaluate our sessions in that way. So I think the circle of participation really sort of deepened, and I was
Yes.
able to see that change pretty much in the way that they were interacting with each other and interacting with the project.
And what are some of the key moments or milestones that have stood out for you during the development of this project?
Right. Well, so as I said, we worked in cycles of 2.5 months.
Yes.
Uh, we started the first cycle was, I think, in May, and we worked right through May and June, right up till the end of June. And then we broke for the rains, which are very heavy in Himachal. And then we again sort of came together in the second cycle in September. Now, the first cycle seemed to go all right. Of course, we had our ups and downs. We were just beginning to break into the project. There were a lot of challenges that we had to overcome. We had to navigate and build trust. But we seemed to be getting somewhere. But when the second cycle came along in September, there was a government order that came out, and it basically spoke about extra hours that the children would have to spend in school because there had been heavy rains and flooding and damages. Schools had been closed right through July and August. The schools wanted to catch up on all the lost time, and they were asking the students to stay back for an hour longer than school time. Now, this was a problem for me because the students used to finish school at about 3. By 3:30, 3:45, they would have walked up and come into Deer Park. We would have a small time devoted to some refreshments, some chai, tea, and then
Yes.
coming into the space, and we would start off by about 4. I would have a decent couple of hours. Now, when the school order came out, my time was slashed completely. And it looked like I may not be able to continue the project anymore. It
Yeah.
seemed quite grim, the whole scenario. And I was frankly very, quite sad and feeling very demotivated about and at a complete loss as to how to change this situation. Um, I spoke with the principals, but there was no chance of changing that. It was a government order that had sort of come from the capital city. So I started thinking about pulling out. But when I discussed this with Deer Park, and they, of course, suggested ways in which we could work, I wasn't terribly hopeful that the children would want to do that. So I went back to the students, and when I discussed with them the possibility of closing down, they were quite vehement about not doing that. They said that they had had a lot of fun in the first cycle. They wanted to continue. They wanted to learn the filmmaking. They wanted to sort of learn how to do their stories. And so the solution that they came up with was that they were going to work in holidays with us. Something that I personally was apprehensive, because we all know when we were children how we treasured our holidays. But they were all willing to come. And that was also the season for Dashera and Diwali holidays, which, as you know, in India is a very big deal.
Yes.
And I remember that the students started discussing amongst themselves. They created the schedule. They wanted to come first thing in the morning, which I thought was like really too early, and they used to turn around and tell me, that's okay, you don't need to come. We'll open the room and we'll start off, and you join us when you can. And I realized that slowly the ownership of the process was shifting. It was going into their hands. And now they were beginning to take the sort of the leadership. They were wanting to start this whole thing themselves. And that's when I realized that the entire project had really started moving at a very different kind of a space, at a different pace and a different dimension. Whatever that we had really set out to do had started unfolding in front of us. I literally saw the change that happened. And the kids were so excited because now they were creating songs, they were wanting to write the films, and they were on their way. And I was like sort of standing around and doing a lot of documentation, um, capturing the images of the ways in which they were working.
It must have been a very proud moment for you. And finally, Manjusha, can you please explain how can other people support or get involved in your project or learn from your approach?
Well, I think the approach that we actually used, as I said to you, was the participatory approach.
Yes.
The participatory communication and being able to tell stories using uh, digital image making in very artistic ways. I think this is largely the approach that we used, and I'm very happy to share that the project worked in the longitudinal ways. I have received tremendous support from Deer Park, and I received a lot of confidence and support from Conscious Community Initiative to be able to put this project together because they funded me. Um, I think that now the way I see the way forward is that to be able to bring transpersonal values into the education system, whether formally or informally, I think that is truly the need of the times. The way that uh, education is about teaching and not about learning. And I think that needs to change. I think the education spaces need to change. I look forward to and hope that I am able to find a like-minded organization which is working locally, which has transpersonal values. And I would like to bring the values and the learning skills that I have applied within the Participatory Media project to a wider group of young students, young adults, in ways that it would benefit them, in ways that it would help them to revision their life and reimagine a future which is so different from the present.
That's wonderful. So Images of Change is more than just a project. It's a movement towards conscious engagement, ecological awareness, and collective creativity. Through your thoughtful approach, you're not only equipping young people with tools for expression, but you're also cultivating a deeper sense of responsibility towards the environment. And as the project continues to evolve, it offers a compelling model for how participatory media can drive social and ecological change. Thank you very much for your time today, Manjusha, and talking about your project so passionately.
Thank you, Charles. Thank you very much. And I want to really thank Conscious Community Initiative. I want to thank Dr. Jessica Bockler. Jessica has been very, very supportive and very understanding and has been a very strong force behind this project. And I also want to thank Deer Park Institute for being there and for sharing their space and bringing in a lot of support. And also the student participants who really engaged, walking miles and kilometers through rain, through the winters, and coming in to participate. Thank
That's
you
great.
so much once again.
Thank you very much.